everybody, and welcome to the very first podcast of the Retirement Village Residents Association, commonly known as the RVRA. I'm joined today by John Rosewarne, who is the Treasurer on our board. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Roger.
So, John, a very, very, very busy period in retirement villages at the moment, with the budget being framed and worked out by managers and operators and residents committees and all those sorts of people. So can you tell us what a budget is and how it comes about?
Thanks, Roger. I think we need to start with a basic principle. That is that the Retirement Villages Act and our own contracts both require that residents reimburse the operator for the costs of operating the village. So the budget, or the annual budget that we keep talking about, is simply the vehicle to record all those expenses. So at the start of January, February, usually the efficient ones are doing it in January anyway, operators begin to prepare their budgets by going back and dragging out all the historical data from previous years and start making some predictions. Sometime in February, ideally, they should have started to talk to residents committees or the finance subcommittee, or if they haven't got one of those, hopefully an interested and capable resident who can deal with this sort of stuff, to at least start to get the budget to a point where it's ready to go.
Thanks, John. So who negotiates with the manager in regards to the budget?
Again, the same people effectively that have been talking with the operators they have up until this point. So the Residents Committee is the body that's authorised to talk on behalf of residents. So in theory, the residents can then, or the Residents Committee at least, can represent the residents by talking to the operator and start to check what's in the budget. My usual approach with these is to sit down and go through all the old historic stuff and look at whether it's moving predictably or not. If it's not, that's a question mark. I then go and look for items in the budget that are unusual or poorly defined, particularly the larger ones, and start to make lists of what I'm going to ask the operator about. And when I've got my list, I go back and start to say, well, okay, can I see the quotes for this particular item of expenditure, or can we talk about what's in this line, because I need to understand it first. And to the extent it's possible, keeping in mind that you can't negotiate on some budget items, they are what they are, but some you can. And if you can, then is there a better outcome we can negotiate on behalf of residents?
Thanks, John. So what about the broader community, the rest of the residents? How do they get involved, and what is their opportunity to talk about the budget?
Until we get to this stage, zero. Effectively, remember, it's the operator's budget, not ours. So the discussions that have been held up to the point where they're ready to talk to residents about it, there is no opportunity really for residents to get involved. Once it's released, however, it's timely that we start to talk about this, because we're doing this recording on the 30th of April, and by the close of business tomorrow, the operators must have the budgets in the hands of their residents to comply with the law 60 days before the start of the new financial year. So it's pretty timely. Once those budgets get out with residents, residents committees really need to start to corral things and get people into a meeting to talk about it in a structured fashion. Because as we all know, if residents start to chat about it, there'll be all sorts of rumours starting, and most of them will be unfounded. So we need to start having information meetings, and then by the end of May, so again, it's got to be within 30 days of the start. By the end of May, there need to have been other meetings if we need to vote on it.
John, we often hear about this term called CPI. Can you explain that to us a bit?
I can. It's probably one of the least understood financial terms around, but it's the most often talked about. CPI technically is a measure of the change in the cost over time of a fixed basket of goods and services. When we talk about a basket of goods, and the media like to talk about it as though it's somebody taking a basket down to Aldi and buying the same stuff every time they go in and comparing the difference. I have to say it's a lot more sophisticated than that. So there are components of this where it's monitored daily. What's the cost of fruit and vegetables, grocery, meat, alcohol, consumable type things. Then there's a separate section where they measure the cost of fuel, which must be interesting at the moment, insurance, banking costs, and so on. And then in another section, they started looking at the cost of motor vehicles and housing and all those sorts of things. So they then combine all of these together and they look for what the growth in that number. So we're comparing the same items today as they were 3 months ago, or in the case of the annual stuff, which we're talking about now, the annual CPI is a comparison of the basket cost on the 31st of March last year compared with the 31st of March this year. And as of the release of the number yesterday, the part of the CPI that we use, and we have to use a specific one in the Act, the Sydney All Groups Index, at the end of March just gone, is 4.4%. And that's the number that villages have to use. Don't be confused by the media talking endlessly about 4.6 as being the CPI. Indeed it is, but it's the national CPI, not the one that we have to use.
Thanks, John. You mentioned before about residents getting a chance to vote. What is that voting process and what are they voting on?
There's two things might happen here. If the increase we're talking about, the increase in your recurrent charges is above 4.4% in this context, then yes, residents will have to vote on it. If the increase is at 4.4 itself or below that, then there is no vote. Residents are taken to have consented to all of this, if that's the case. Something the RVRA are objecting to at the moment. We need to have something done about that. But at the moment, that's the way the law stands. If you're in the first category and you do have to vote, then there will have to be a meeting held, as I said before, by the end of May. Hopefully we've already had our information sessions and residents are now aware of what we're talking about and, more importantly, aware of what it is they're voting on. Because at that meeting, residents will need to vote twice. Not once, but twice. The first vote they do is to accept the increase in their recurrent charges or not. And the second one is to accept the expenditure in the budget that we're considering here. It's not just one vote.
Okay, thanks, John. What happens if the budget's not approved?
Things begin to get a bit interesting. If the vote is not passed, that is, residents have rejected the idea of paying more, then residents can't simply go to the operator and say, well, I don't like it. The Act requires that they need to specify which parts of the budget they don't like. And typically we're specifying line items of concern, and that is the budget is comprised the whole bunch of line items of different types of expenditure. So you need to nominate the ones that you don't accept specifically. And it's those ones that become the topic of the negotiation between the Residents Committee or Finance Subcommittee and the operator. Now, in that negotiation, some change might be achievable, some may not be, but regardless of the outcome, a new budget then has to come back to the residents again. It may be the same, it may be changed, it may not be changed enough for residents, but regardless, the new one has to come back to them, and then another vote has to be held. Now, it's not quite the same as the first one, because if you say no to this one, you're in no man's land because there is no third choice. And residents need to understand that if they vote to refuse it a second time, the operator is left with no choice but to take the decision to the tribunal for a ruling. And the tribunal has the authority to rule that it be accepted or not. So don't decline it unless you're aware of the fact that's what's going to happen.
Okay, thanks, John. A lot of information there. Finally, John, where do residents' committees or residents go if they want further information?
Okay. To me, the obvious answer is that everybody can look at our website, for example, which is a great place to look for information. It's available to all residents, and there's some truly valuable resources there on. And perhaps one of the most valuable ones is a budget process guide that was developed a couple of years ago that talks about exactly what I've been talking about in a bit more detail with all the timelines included. It's a really good process. For our members, they can come to us and look at putting an inquiry in and coming direct to one of the board members eventually and talking to us. That way we can give them some guidance on what they should be doing. The other option, I suppose, is to talk to your village auditor, but I'm not quite sure how much they can help until the thing's either passed or otherwise.
Yeah, thank you, John. Quite a lot of information there. And just to reinforce what John said, if you need further information, you can go to the RVRA website, rvra.org.au, or you can contact our admin people on admin@rvra.org.au, or you can put in a request, as John said, to our admin staff, and a board member will respond to your request. So thank you, John. Thank you, viewers. Thank you for listening to our very first podcast. Stay tuned. There will be more. Thank you for listening. Take care.